The Velthari Empire had conquered 412 civilizations across 11 galaxies. They had burned worlds, shattered moons, erased species from the living memory of the universe. But the day they executed a 12-year-old human girl on live galactic broadcast, they made the only mistake that would ever truly matter. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what humanity was to the galaxy, not what humanity thought it was. Not the songs humans sang to themselves in the dark between the stars about courage and destiny and the fire in their souls. No, what humanity actually was to every other species watching from the edges of mapped space, through telescope arrays and classified intelligence networks and whispered diplomatic cables, was a warning that nobody had yet learned to read. The Velthari certainly hadn't. They were ancient, older than most civilizations dared to calculate. Their empire stretched across star clusters the way a shadow stretches across a floor, inevitable, total, swallowing everything in its path without malice, without mercy, without the slightest acknowledgement that what it consumed had ever mattered. They did not conquer out of hatred. They conquered out of habit, out of administrative efficiency, out of the cold, organizational logic of an empire that had been expanding for so long it had forgotten how to do anything else. They classified species the way a librarian classifies books. Category 7, primitive, resource value only, no diplomatic recognition. Category 4, developing, limited autonomy, tributary status. Category 1, peer civilization, full rights under Velthari Galactic Accord. Humanity had been assessed 43 years prior by a Velthari survey team that spent 11 days observing Earth from orbit, cataloged what they found, filed their report, and departed without ever making contact. Their conclusion, Category 6, emerging primitive, emotional instability, high aggression index, recommend containment observation for next 2 centuries before reassessment. Category 6, not even worthy of a first contact protocol. The survey team's final notation, buried in Appendix 7 of a report nobody important ever read, said this: species demonstrates unusual biological stress tolerance. Recommends psychological evaluation before integration. Note subject species appears to have no biological off switch for conflict persistence. Anomalous, further study suggested. The Velthari filed it, forgot it, moved on. They would remember it later. By then, it would be far too late. Her name was Lena Vasquez. 12 years old, brown eyes, a gap between her 2 front teeth that her mother always said made her smile look like sunshine breaking through clouds. She had been born on Kepler Station, a small human deep space research outpost orbiting a dim red star at the outermost edge of what humanity considered explored territory. Her father was a xenobiologist. Her mother ran atmospheric systems. Lena herself spent her free hours cataloging microorganisms in the station's sample lab and sending audio messages back to her grandmother on Earth that always started with the same words: "Abuela, you wouldn't believe what I found today." The Velthari arrived at Kepler Station on a Tuesday. There was no warning, no declaration, no hail on any frequency. One moment the station's long-range sensors showed empty space. The next moment, there was a Velthari enforcement cruiser, 3 kilometers of black hull and silent weapon systems, sitting between the station and the star like a closed fist. A transmission came through. Velthari standard administrative dialect, auto-translated by the station systems into fractured but comprehensible English. Category 6, installation. You are operating within disputed Velthari territorial expansion Zone 7 Gamma. This station is hereby classified as an unauthorized structure. Prepare for administrative processing. The station's commander, a 40-year-old former NASA engineer named Dr. James Ockafer, immediately broadcast a response on every available frequency. He cited Earth's territorial claims. He cited galactic free navigation accords humanity had signed with 3 other spacefaring civilizations. He requested contact with any diplomatic representative. He kept his voice level. He kept his hands steady on the console. He did everything right. The Velthari did not respond to any of it. Instead, they sent a boarding party, 47 humans on that station, scientists, engineers, 2 children, Lena and a 9-year-old boy named Tobias, whose parents ran the station's quantum communication array. The Velthari separated them immediately. Adults to one section, children to another. Velthari processing protocol categorized by biological development stage, assess utility value, assign status accordingly. What happened next was recorded by the station's internal systems. Every camera, every microphone, every sensor array that still had power. It was recorded. And later, much later, every second of it would be watched by 12 billion humans simultaneously, in complete, thunderstruck silence. The Velthari administrator, a being called Executor Drath Vel, tall and gray-limbed, with 4 sets of eyes that moved independently and a voice like grinding stone, walked through the station with the casual authority of someone conducting a property inspection. He cataloged equipment. He flagged resources for extraction. He had his subordinates tag humans with identification markers the way you tag livestock at auction. Then he reached the room where the children were being held. Looked at them for a long moment. His 4 eyes moved slowly, calculating, assessing. Then he said something that his own translation systems rendered with horrible clinical precision as Category 6 juveniles, no utility value at current development stage, remove it as inefficiency. Dr. Akafer, watching through a viewport, began screaming. He threw himself against the locked door until his shoulder broke. He kept throwing himself against it. The door did not open. Tobias survived. The Velthari administrator reconsidered at the last moment, not out of mercy, but because the boy's father controlled the quantum array and his cooperation was momentarily useful. Lena Vasquez did not survive. The entire thing was transmitted on the Velthari's own administrative broadcast network, a routine logging of enforcement actions, the kind of bureaucratic documentation they'd been filing for thousands of years, sent automatically to their central archive, and by the particular configuration of the relay network in that sector, accidentally rebroadcast on 47 different frequencies, including several that human deep space monitoring stations were already listening to. Earth received the transmission 11 hours later, all of it, every second. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a species when something crosses a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. It is not the silence of shock, not the silence of grief, not the silence of fear. It is the silence of a decision being made so deep in the collective soul of a civilization that it doesn't need words. It doesn't need debate. It doesn't need committees or votes or speeches. It simply arrives. Like a door closing, like a safety being switched off, Earth went silent for 6 hours. Every major broadcast network, every government transmission, every public forum and social channel and emergency frequency. 6 hours of silence so complete that the Velthari monitoring stations, which had by now become aware that the transmission had reached human space and were logging the situation as a Category 6 emotional response, likely temporary, monitoring advised, initially assumed something had gone wrong with their own equipment. Then Earth spoke, not through a single voice, not through a president or a prime minister or a secretary general, through every transmitter humanity had ever built, every antenna, every deep space relay, every communication satellite, every quantum array, every station and ship and outpost in explored space, all of them simultaneously broadcasting on every frequency the Velthari used. The message was 11 words. 11 words in Velthari administrative dialect, translated with perfect precision by systems Earth had been quietly studying for 43 years since the survey team's visit. 11 words that every Velthari ship in the sector received at the exact same moment. You have committed your last act of administration. Prepare for reclassification. The Velthari monitoring stations flagged it, categorized it, filed a report. Category 6 emotional response. Threat language consistent with pre-rational aggression pattern. Probability of meaningful military action, 3.7%. Recommend standard containment protocols, 3.7%. Somewhere in the Velthari Central Archive, the Appendix 7 notation from 43 years ago sat unread. Subject species appear to have no biological off switch for conflict persistence. Anomalous. Here is what the Velthari did not know. Here is what almost nobody knew, because humanity had learned, slowly, painfully, across centuries of being the smallest, youngest, most isolated spacefaring species in a galaxy full of things that could erase them, that the most important strategic asset is not firepower. It's information asymmetry. It's letting everyone around you believe the report. It's being Category 6 while quietly becoming something else entirely. The Velthari survey team that visited Earth 43 years ago saw what humanity showed them. Orbital stations, early FTL prototypes, conventional military systems, the kind of capability profile you'd expect from a species 2 centuries away from being worth talking to. They did not see the other programs. They did not see Project IRONVEIL, the classified initiative, 31 years old, to develop military FTL systems an entire generation beyond humanity's civilian technology. Ships that didn't appear on any public registry. Ships built in facilities that didn't officially exist, in orbits of moons that nobody was supposed to be visiting. They did not see the Covenant network, a web of deep space monitoring systems so precisely calibrated that Earth had been listening to Velthari communications for 38 years. Logging, translating, mapping, building piece by piece, a complete tactical picture of Velthari enforcement fleet movements, resupply chains, command hierarchies, and most critically, the precise locations of every single ship in Velthari space within 6 light-years of human territory. They did not see the 11,000 soldiers of the 1st Interstellar Corps who had spent 7 years training for exactly one scenario. Not a defensive war, not a border conflict, a response, because humanity had done the math a long time ago. In a galaxy where a species could show up without warning and do what the Velthari did to 412 civilizations, there was only one deterrence that worked. Not treaties, not diplomacy, not mutual assured destruction in the conventional sense. Something older, something more primal, something every bully in the history of human childhood understands in their bones the first time they hit someone who doesn't fall down. Consequences so severe, so immediate, so total, that the cost of ever touching anything human became, by any rational calculation, existentially prohibitive. The strategy had a name inside the classified programs. They called it the Last Mercy Doctrine. The name referred to the moment before it was implemented. The calculation was simple. Humanity would absorb one provocation, one unprovoked attack on any human life, anywhere in explored space. It would absorb it, document it, and respond not with proportionality but with everything. The idea was that you only had to do it once, if you did it right. Earth had been ready for 11 years. They had been hoping, praying, in the way that exhausted, frightened people pray, that they would never have to use it. Lena Vasquez changed the calculation. And 6 hours after the silence fell, Admiral Sira Akaffer, James Akaffer's sister, commander of the 1st Interstellar Corps, a woman who had spent 7 years preparing for this day, and had spent the last 6 hours sitting alone in her command room watching her brother throw his broken shoulder against a locked door over and over and over again on a recording she'd already watched 19 times, stood up from her chair. She straightened her uniform. She walked to the bridge. She looked at her crew, 1,200 men and women who already knew what she was going to say, because they had all watched the same recording, and they all wore the same expression, which was not fury and was not grief, but was something quieter and colder and far more dangerous than either. She said, "Execute." The Velthari had never experienced a simultaneous, coordinated, multi-vector attack in their recorded history. Why would they? In 11 galaxies of conquest, no one had ever been positioned to do it. You can't outplan an empire that has spent millennia perfecting the science of strategic dominance. You can't outbuild them. You can't outmaneuver them in any conventional sense. Unless you've been watching them for 38 years. Unless you know exactly where every ship is. Unless your FTL technology is a generation ahead of what anyone thinks you have. Unless you hit them everywhere at once. The IRONVEIL fleet dropped out of FTL at 247 locations simultaneously. 247 points in Velthari-controlled space, specifically calculated to be the exact positions of every Velthari enforcement vessel within 6 light-years of the Kepler station incident. Supply depots, communication hubs, the 3 regional command stations that coordinated operations in the sector. The Velthari had not raised their threat assessment for humanity above 3.7%. Their defensive systems were, in the technical language of the after-action reports that would never actually be written because there would be nobody left to write them, not calibrated for this engagement profile. What happened in the next 4 hours was not a battle. Battles require 2 sides capable of meaningfully contesting the outcome. This was a demonstration. Every Velthari asset in the target zone was destroyed with the kind of systematic, methodical, almost administrative efficiency that the Velthari themselves would have recognized, would have even admired in another context. Human targeting systems had been modeling these strikes for 7 years. Every firing solution was pre-calculated. Every approach vector optimized. The IRONVEIL fleet moved through Velthari space like a scalpel, precise, cold, purposeful. Executor Drathvel's ship was the 44th target eliminated. The destruction of each target was recorded in full, broadcast on every Velthari frequency, every alien frequency, every frequency humanity could reach, not in celebration, not in triumph, as documentation, as a message. Admiral Akaffer had written the message herself in the quiet of 6 months ago when she'd still hoped she'd never send it. She'd reread it 100 times, changed it, simplified it, down to its absolute essence. When the last target in the strike package was confirmed destroyed, it broadcast automatically. It was one sentence. "This is what we do to those who harm our children." The Velthari High Council received the battle reports in real time. 412 civilizations conquered, 11 galaxies under administrative control, a military apparatus so vast that its full strength had not been deployed in 2,000 years because nothing had ever required it. And in 6 light-years of frontier space, 247 assets eliminated in 4 hours by a species they had categorized as primitive. The Council's chief military advisor, a being who had overseen the last 3 major expansion campaigns and had personally signed the administrative orders that reduced 3 Category 7 civilizations to extraction sites, sat in front of the battle projections for a very long time without speaking. Then he pulled up the original survey report, read the Appendix 7 notation for the first time. Subject species appears to have no biological off switch for conflict persistence. Anomalous, further study suggested. He sat with that for a while. Then he asked his staff a question that no Velthari administrator had ever needed to ask in recorded history. What is humanity's full military capability? Not assessed, actual. The answer took 3 days to compile. When it came back, it was worse than he had imagined. Because the 247 simultaneous strikes, the perfect target acquisition, the FTL capability that was a generation beyond what they should have had, that wasn't humanity's full military capability. That was one fleet, one of 7, and the other 6 hadn't moved yet. The Velthari had a word for what happened in the next 72 hours inside their High Council. Loosely translated, it meant the moment when you realized the stone you kicked was the top of a mountain. Intelligence teams were dispatched. Every classified asset in or near human space was activated. Velthari analysts who had spent careers studying expansion patterns and resource acquisition suddenly found themselves doing something entirely new, studying a species in controlled reverse, trying to understand not how to categorize it, but how to survive it. What they found dismantled everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. The 7 fleets were only the beginning. Humanity had been building for this. Not for conquest, not for expansion, for defense, but the kind of defense that understood with absolute clarity that the best version of defense is the kind the attacker never recovers from. Research stations that appeared to be scientific outposts were, behind closed systems and classified access codes, advanced weapons development facilities. 15 years ahead, 20 years in some cases. Technologies the Velthari hadn't seen, not because they were impossible, but because nobody had ever been desperate enough to develop them. Desperation, the analysts were beginning to understand, was a profound accelerant. But it wasn't the technology that scared the Velthari chief military advisor the most. It was the psychological profile buried in the intelligence reports. The human species had a documented, consistent, cross-cultural behavioral pattern that appeared in every study, every historical analysis, every recorded conflict across their entire history. The pattern was this: when humans fought for territory, they could be negotiated with. When they fought for resources, they could be satisfied. When they fought for ideology, they could sometimes be argued out of it. But when they fought for people, when it was about someone they loved, someone under their protection, someone they had claimed as their own, the negotiation window closed. And it did not reopen. Every civilization that had ever pushed humanity to that threshold in their own history among themselves, across every century of their existence, had discovered this the hard way. And without exception, the conflict only ended when the threat to their people was permanently removed. Not contained, not deterred, removed. The Velthari military advisor stared at that section of the report for a very long time. Then he looked at the numbers again. 7 fleets. Weapons systems 15 years ahead. A doctrine called last mercy that humanity had apparently prepared and waited to use for over a decade. And they hadn't used all of it yet. 247 strikes. 4 hours. 1 fleet, a demonstration. He realized, with the specific chill of a being who had spent his life in positions of absolute power experiencing genuine fear for the first time, that the broadcast message wasn't bravado. This is what we do to those who harm our children. It was a statement of fact. It was the warning. The actual response hadn't started yet. The Velthari sent a diplomatic contact signal to Earth on day 4. Humanity didn't answer for 17 hours. Not because they were debating, not because of communication delays. Admiral Okafor later wrote in her private journal that the 17 hours was entirely deliberate, that she sat in her command room, looked at the signal notification, and then very calmly went and ate breakfast, filed 2 reports, reviewed crew fitness assessments, and read a book for 3 hours before notifying Earth Command that a signal had arrived. I wanted them to understand the new topology, she wrote. I wanted the silence to work on them for a while. When Earth finally accepted the diplomatic contact, they sent one person, not an admiral, not a general, not a head of state or a foreign minister or a career diplomat. They sent Dr. Elena Vasquez, Lena's mother. She appeared on the communication channel in a plain gray sweater. No uniform, no title, no delegation behind her. Her hair was pulled back and her eyes were the particular kind of calm that exists on the other side of grief, so total it has become something structural, not a wound anymore, but a new architecture. The Velthari diplomatic team on the other end of the channel, 4 senior council members, 2 military advisors, a staff of 30, had clearly expected something else. The confusion was visible even across species. She let them be confused for a moment. Then she said, in perfect Velthari administrative dialect, because she had been a xenolinguist before she was a xenobiologist's wife, before she was a mother, and she had spent 11 days in the 4 days since the broadcast doing nothing but studying every hour of Velthari communication recordings Earth possessed. I am here to explain your situation to you, not to negotiate. You will listen first. Then you may speak. She talked for 40 minutes. She did not raise her voice once. She explained, with the methodical precision of someone who had organized her words the way you organize the only things that still matter when everything else is ash, exactly what humanity had done, exactly what humanity was capable of doing further, and exactly the single, non-negotiable condition under which humanity would stop. Not reparations, not territorial concessions, not diplomatic recognition. One condition. The Velthari Empire would, within 30 days, transmit to every frequency in the galaxy, every species, every civilization, every monitoring station and diplomatic relay and academic archive, a full accounting of every enforcement action, every administrative processing, every planetary extraction, every species that had been categorized and consumed, a complete, unredacted record, every name that could be recovered, every world, every life, not as punishment for the Velthari, as a memorial for everyone else. You erased them, Elena Vasquez said. You will unerase them, every species you categorized, every civilization you processed. They existed. The universe will know they existed, and the universe will know how they were treated, and the universe will know what happened when you did it to us. She paused. And then the galaxy will know we are watching. We will always be watching. And this, she gestured very slightly to nothing in particular, which everyone in the channel understood to mean everything that had happened, everything that might still happen, is what mercy looks like from us. It will not look like this twice. The Velthari Council was silent. She let them sit in it. Then she said, "You have 29 days remaining. I suggest you begin." And she ended the channel. The Velthari complied. Not because they had suddenly developed a conscience, though certain things happened inside the Empire in the months that followed that suggested, in the strange alchemy of consequences, that exposure can do unexpected things even to ancient institutions. Not because they were legally or morally compelled by any galactic authority, because they ran the numbers. 7 human fleets. Technology 15 years ahead. A doctrine that had been waiting for a decade to be fully deployed. And a species that, by every piece of intelligence they now possessed, would in fact do exactly what they said they would do, not out of rage, not out of wild grief, but with that specific, devastating, organized relentlessness that the original survey team had noticed 43 years ago and described with accidental precision as no biological off switch for conflict persistence. The transmission went out on day 26. Every frequency, every channel, every corner of the galaxy that electromagnetic signals and quantum relays could reach. 412 civilizations, named, their histories as fully reconstructed as Velthari administrative records permitted, which was, it turned out, far more complete than anyone had expected because the Velthari were meticulous archivists even of the things they destroyed. The records existed. They had simply never been shared. Worlds, names, cultures, art forms, languages, religious practices, foods, songs, the things that make a species real. For 37 days, the transmission played on repeat across the galaxy. Species that had been living under the shadow of Velthari expansion for centuries, huddled in their diplomatic submission, filing their tributary payments, carefully not asking about the civilizations that had disappeared, heard the names of their predecessors for the first time, heard that they had existed, heard how they had ended, and heard at the very end of the transmission, appended by the Velthari not because Earth required it, but because the diplomatic team had apparently decided it was strategically advisable to be unambiguous about what had changed. The species classified as Category 6 designation humanity has been reclassified. New category, uncategorizable. New directive, do not approach, do not engage, do not provoke. This directive is permanent. In the years that followed, something unexpected happened. 3 civilizations that had been under Velthari tributary status for generations, having watched the transmission, having seen the names of the lost, having heard the word uncategorizable applied to a species that had, until recently, been filed as primitive and forgotten, sent diplomatic contacts to Earth, not asking for military protection, not asking Earth to fight their battles. Humans would have said no to that anyway. Asking for something else, asking to talk, because if a Category 6 primitive with emotional instability and high aggression index could become uncategorizable in 43 years, if humanity could sit quietly in a galaxy full of things that could erase them and build and watch and wait and prepare, and then respond not with panic but with precision, then maybe the calculus of survival wasn't as simple as they'd been told. Maybe there were things to learn from the species that kept getting underestimated. Maybe the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't the biggest empire. Maybe it was the quiet one, the one that filed Category 6 and smiled and started working, the one that looked at a galaxy full of apex predators and thought, "Give us time." The one that, when pushed past the only threshold that truly mattered, didn't just fight back. It redefined the rules. In the Velthari archive, sealed in a section that was now broadly understood to be the most important administrative record the Empire had ever produced, was a single updated file. Species, human. Designation, Earth. Previously, Category 6. Updated assessment, unknown ceiling. Unknown limit. Unusual biology, high emotional investment in social bonds appears to function as exponential force multiplier rather than tactical vulnerability as originally assessed. Corrected, this species does not fight harder when threatened. It fights harder when something it loves is threatened. There is no scale for this. Do not discover the upper bound. Do not give them a reason. Somewhere in a research station orbiting a dim red star, a 9-year-old boy named Tobias, older now, quieter now, with eyes that had seen things no child should see, sat in a rebuilt lab at a rebuilt station and looked out at the stars. On the wall beside him was a photograph, a gap-toothed smile, brown eyes, and written underneath it in a 12-year-old's handwriting on a note she'd stuck to his locker 3 weeks before everything changed. "Tobias, you wouldn't believe what I found today." He looked at the photograph for a long time, then he turned back to his work. The galaxy had 412 reasons to know what humanity was. It only needed one reason to fear what humanity would become. Her name was Lena Vasquez, and the universe would remember her name. Forever.